In this session, we're going to be talking about something that everyone likes to talk about, business. And we are delighted to have Professor Jihoon Rim joining us from New York, where he teaches at the NYU Stern School of Business. Professor Rim is a former CEO of Kakao, Korea's largest mobile platform, and a $45 billion high-tech company. As the youngest major CEO in Korea, Professor Rim was at the helm between 2015 and 2018, during which Kakao successfully expanded into new areas including finance, content, mobility, and more. In recognition of his performance, Professor Rim was ranked #1 in the 2017 Korea's Best CEO survey. And prior to Kakao, Professor Rim's career took multiple turns and twists, from engineering to consulting to an early stage venture capital firm that he had founded. I think we are really privileged today to hear him speak. Before we kick off, let me just remind the audience that if you've got questions for Professor Rim, put them in the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We've also got questions that are submitted prior to this event, and I will go through them later. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jayon. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yes, we're really honored to have you join in today. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, you've certainly had a very illustrious career. So we're hoping that you could walk us through that journey in greater detail and how it got to where you are today.
Okay, I mean, you could just, jump in and chime in anytime while I'm speaking, but I'll begin from, I think, right after graduating from college. I was very lucky, and privileged to work at Naver, actually as my military duty at that time. And, working there after finishing the duty, I kind of realized that, hey, you know what, I might want to try out consulting, because even back then, and I think even now, a lot of the smart kids wanted to be a part of that, consulting gig, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain. And I thought like, hey, why not try it? And then, I got into BCG, and then I quit in 10 months because I realized that, it's a nice job, but I didn't really love the part that most of the job that we're doing over there is producing documents. One is that, and the second part is that I just had a feeling that we are too much underestimating the importance of execution, because basically consulting is producing a document, sending it to the client, and from that point it's the client doing the work or not doing the work, so we don't really know. And from thanks to the experience that I had in Naver, I kind of already realized that a lot of work is done by the people working at the company, not at the top tier who is making the decision. So that's like only like 20% of the work. The majority of the work is actually done by the people who are working there. So I was like, oh, you know what? I'm working like 12 to 15 hours a day, but I'm not really sure if I'm really adding value to the industry or to the society or whatever it is. So I quit. A lot of people told me that I shouldn't, because BCG is like one of the top consulting firm. And then I was struggling what I should do, and then one of my friends told me that, hey, you know what, why don't you try venture capital? And at that time I didn't even know what venture capital is, so I even had to Google the terminology. And I was like, oh, is this finance? And I kind of realized that, oh, this is slightly different, from finance, because I was not like a huge fan of finance. And then I kind of felt like this is like a combination of business and tech. And thanks to the experience that I had in Naver, I kind of had that experience. I knew a lot of people. And then, I kind of loved business. I also learned a little bit from BCG. So I was like, hey, why not try? And I went to Softbank. That was 2007. And, back then in South Korea, there were not that many venture capitalists who who invested in internet and mobile industry, and SoftBank was one of them. So I spent like 5 years there, and actually, I was very satisfied. A lot of my investees, portfolio companies, became pretty successful, and I thought it was pretty good. But as the team and as the fund grew, actually, the check size per investment grew too. And that means that, the investment focus shifted a little bit more to growth stage companies rather than the super early stage companies. But I was very, passionate in the early stage companies. So I was like, you know what? Now the fund is reaching like $1 billion in SoftBank Korea. It's going to be very difficult to, go to very early stage investing like less than $1 million, like 200K, 300K, 500K. So I really thought about it, and then I decided to, start my own fund with, of course, the help with a lot of people, including the chairman of Kakao. And then, yeah, that was 2012. And then, yeah, our first fund was pretty small, like $10 million. And as I said, our investment check was like 200K, 300K, maximum like 500K. So yeah, we had enough money to invest in a lot of interesting companies. And very luckily, again, a lot of them became super successful. A lot of them actually. So yeah, again, I became a little bit more famous in the industry. And that was 2015, when all of a sudden, when I was not expecting this at all, the board of Kakao suddenly approached me, and they were telling me that, I should run the company, because at that time, Kakao was in a little bit in crisis. And yeah, they had to change the leadership. And I was like, hey, you know what? I was a venture capitalist for 10 years. Before that, I was like, a consultant. Before that, I was just working, at Naver, and all of a sudden leading like a huge company. At that time, it was like a $6 billion company. Now it's like $40 billion company, right? But anyways, it was still big. 6 billion is a big, number. And I was like thinking about it. And again, I was like, you know what, why not try? What do I really lose, if I don't, pursue this opportunity? And I might talk about this again, but this is my mentality, which meaning is like, why not try? What do I really lose? And then I just, took on that job. Very luckily enough, again, there's a luck part everywhere. Trust me. Throughout the career, luck is a very big part. We can talk about that later. But anyways, thanks to my colleagues, the company, as I said, was in crisis, turned around. And in 2018, like everything was on track. The revenue, the operating income, the stock price, everything was in a much, much better position. So I decided I want to quit, because, originally becoming like a CEO of a big tech company was not my dream job. It was just something that approached me. The opportunity just, came to me. It wasn't like my dream job. So after finishing the job, because actually, honestly speaking, there are some not that fun parts of being a CEO of a public company. So, I completed my mission. I told them that I want to, step down. And then in 2018, I stepped down. And then I came to New York. I was having fun. Again, kind of accidentally, after talking to a bunch of friends, and then, also talking to some professors. A professor of Stern told me that, hey, I should teach MBA students. And I was like, hey, interesting. I never really thought about that. I was never educated in the United States. I don't even have an MBA. I just have, a bachelor's degree. And then he was like, I should really teach. And I just said that, okay, let me just try it out. So I just tried it out as an adjunct professor. And then I kind of realized that, the students loved it. The demand was clear. And, after a little bit later, the school offered me the full-time job, and I became a full-time professor. So everything, if you look back, actually, my whole career, it's not something that I totally planned out. I didn't create like an Excel model saying that, what, first I have to finish this skill set, and then this will bring, me to the next level. This is going to be like a perfect stepping stone. I didn't do anything like that. I just, really pushed myself to new areas And I kind of love that. You know, some people don't really like it. Some people prefer to stay in the place that they're really good at. In my case, I always think that after a few years, you know, my learning curve dramatically goes up and then it plateaus. After like 2, 3 years, it plateaus. And I become pretty good at that area. And that's the time that I get a little bit bored. And then I want to pursue a new thing. That's the whole thing. If you really think about my 15, 16, 17 years of my whole career, it was like a continuous iteration of those kind of things. That's the reason you see that my career was moving around quite a bit.
Wow, that is really incredible, and a lot of action packed in to that. It seems like, it sounds like that your career path has been a function of, as you say, some luck, some serendipity, but also your drive and growth mindset. And thank you so much for sharing that with our audience. I, I guess let me just start off by focusing on your tenure as CEO at Kakao. I'm sure it's not an easy task to manage and run a complex tech company with thousands of employees. So would you mind, sharing us some takeaways from that position?
I'm not really sure if this is going to resonate to a lot of students yet, because you are still, you know, in the beginning of your adulthood and you just started, studying.
Right.
But if you really think about it, during your undergrad or even at the graduate schools, what we learn is problem solving, right? We think that's like the most important thing. You know, you get a problem, you have to excel, you have to be the best solver. And you know, in the early stage of your career, it might be true, especially when you're working as an individual contributor. You know, solving problems is your role. But once you move up the corporate ladder and once you become like an executive, and if you become like a CEO or a senior executive, you shouldn't be the person who's solving problem. If you are the person who's solving problem, there's a problem, seriously. That organization is not really working well.
Mm.
Meaning, because if you are the person who makes all the decisions and are solving the problems, everybody's gonna just look at you and wait for you to be that solving problem. They would never, go beyond what you are trying to, solve. So basically, you have to understand, if you're a leader, you're solving a problem by placing people to the leadership positions. So basically, like maybe the most important job of a CEO is placing the right people to the problem, and they will, solve the problem. You are the person who are supporting by providing the resources that they need. And of course, sometimes you have to make some big decisions. For example, entering into a new market or closing a business. Those are the big strategic decisions based on the strategy and the direction. But other than that, it's really about, placing the right person to the opportunity and, letting them do the work. So that's something that we don't understand, even at at the MBA level teaching. I often tell my students that all the learnings that you had here, it's valuable for sure. But if you become like at a senior executive level, um, that might not be the best way to actually lead an organization, because you have to make the people working for the company and working for you really motivated. They have to feel that they are really, solving the problem. If not, they won't do their best. They will just look at you, the CEO or the senior executive, and they would wait for the decision, right?
Right. I see. I think you hammer home a point that is sometimes neglected by the business press or the media. Is that people have this conception of the so-called, superstar CEO, charismatic personality, the CEO being the firm itself. And I think what you just shared with our audience really echoes the importance of task delegation.
Right. The thing is, like you pointed out, right, that I think a lot of the misconception is coming from the media, the movies, the documentaries, for example, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, whatever it is. But if you really think about the nature of the media, right? Think about that you are creating a documentary, right? And there's a CEO, and that person only listens and doesn't really do a lot of job. And then, even though like he or she's at the meeting, like 80% of the time, that person just listens to others and, says that, hey, I think you're in the right direction. Just do what you believe. Do you think that's going to be a fun documentary? No.
No.
The viewership is going to be really bad, right? So that's the reason they come up with some dramatic episodes that they heard. Maybe it could be true, it could be a little bit exaggerated. And yeah, those are the kind of the very,
Mm.
best selling content in a sense. But if you really think about it, they, of course, there are some CEOs who have that type of personality, and there are some CEOs who lead that way. But I believe that there are going to be just a few of them, and most of the CEOs, actually they understand that they shouldn't be the center of everything. If that's the case, again, I guarantee there's going to be a huge inefficiency in the organization because everybody's going to look at the CEO.
I see. I see. Well, thank you so much for sharing that view. Let's then move to my next question. Since we've had some aspiring entrepreneurs in the room today, so as a former venture capitalist, you have seen, you have worked with many startups. What do you suppose are some qualities that might set the successful ones apart?
Mm-hmm. That's actually, a difficult question to answer because a lot of the time, even the most successful venture capitalists, they get maybe 70% of their investment wrong, right? Only like 20 or 30% of their investment succeed. So we have to begin with that. So if there's like a venture capitalist or anybody famous who is pretty definite in whatever that person is saying, that's a red flag. I want to begin with that. And another caveat is going to be whatever I say here, it's going to be easy to find a counter example because there's no one way to become, successful. That's for sure, but still, basically it has to go with something which is going to be the team and the market, the problem that you're going to solve. So basically, if you don't really have a great team, and a great team is going to be, a lot of things combined. For example, not only the smartness, you don't really have to be the smartest person in the world to become like the best entrepreneur, but at least, some smartness, including the street smartness, hustling to get the problem solved, and being, relentless, always trying to, come up with a better answer and having a great learning curve. Those kind of things are going to be like the key components of a great team, I believe. So really, really, you need a great team because, the business plan that you came up in the beginning, it's not going to last and you're going to change it. Definitely. Trust me, it's going to be changed along the path. And the other part, of course, is going to be how big or crucial is the problem that you're going to solve, right? You can't just come up with like another idea of a social media. That's not like a real problem that is needed to be solved. So some kind of combination of these two, I think it's a good lens to begin with. But again, even though you have these two things right, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be a success.
Right, and certainly there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, thank you for trying to promote this more nuanced understanding. So I also wanted to ask you about your time at KCube Ventures in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
and back then you invested in Dunamu,
Mm-hmm.
which is the operator of Korea's largest cryptocurrency exchange.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to invest in this field of blockchain pretty early on? It's 2013, and would you be able to share your view on the future of crypto assets for
Mm-hmm.
the audience?
I think actually this question, is perfectly related to the previous one about entrepreneurship. And I'm glad that you brought up Dynamo because actually all the credit really goes to the team, including the founder, of course. Because in 2012 or 13, I don't even remember at the time that I invested, they were not doing crypto. They were not doing the crypto exchange. They were a very small team, and they were running a news recommendation service. And at the time that I met, the founder, I really liked him. And I also knew that, he was an extraordinary engineer. And honestly speaking, I didn't really like the service at that time. So I told him that, I would love to invest in the company, and, I would like to help you if I can be help, of. But I told him that maybe news recommendation might not be the best idea, especially in South Korea, because, they are a limited, news publications, and Naver and Daum actually already licensed all the content. So for a startup to come up with a news recommendation service, I wasn't really sure. So I told him that I would invest. I would love to invest, but let's see a little bit, a negative of this opportunity. And he tried it out for a few more months, and eventually he, decided to pivot. And at that time, the business item that he pivoted was stock trading. So that was like, the Korean version of Robinhood in a sense. And in 2000, I don't even remember, it was 2016 or something, that they expanded and actually entered into the crypto exchange market, right? So again, that's the reason I'm saying that all the credit goes to the team. I didn't tell them that, hey, you know what? In 2013, I didn't tell them that, hey, blockchain is going to be the big thing. We should really enter this place. No, it's not. It's all them really thinking about what's the best for their team, thinking about their capabilities, because they had a pretty good engineering team. And if you think about, stock trading and block, chain trading, having a legit engineering behind the platform is really important. You can't really screw that up, right? So yeah, they became unbelievably great, right? They're super successful. I'm so happy for them. Yeah, this is like another perfect example of saying that there's a huge luck part and also determination. And as a venture capitalist, in my case, as a venture capitalist, I was lucky, right? I didn't know that it's going to end up like this.
Right. That this is really a team effort. I guess as
did you also ask about the cryptos and everything? Right.
So I did. If you don't mind, I can just
let's just go, high level.
Sure.
I'm not going to comment on specific cryptos, right? I don't think I'm not that knowledgeable in a sense, but I think how to view this market. I think a good way to view any kind of tech market, whatever it is, like internet, mobile, AI, voice interaction, crypto, VR, any kind of big, new, disruptive technology. I believe they follow the Gartner hype curve path. So if you haven't heard about this, later on you could just Google Gartner hype curve. Gartner hype curve. So basically, it's like basically saying that all the technologies booms really fast, and then it kind of bursts, not necessarily totally, but like it goes down like 50% or 70%, and that is the time that actually it changed courses, and from that point you see gradual progression. So even the internet, if you think about it, in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was up and went down, and a lot of people thought that internet is a bubble, but from that point gradually it went up, right? AI is the similar thing, VR the same. In early 2010 or something, 2000, when was it, 2012, I think, Mark Zuckerberg came out and he was saying that the VR is going to change the whole world. It went up, and then it didn't happen, so it went down. And we see recently, right, during the past 3 years, VR is really becoming real. So it's going up. So I think crypto, in a sense, there are a lot of legit crypto projects, and there are also a lot of sketchy projects, I think. So that's the phase when you're having this kind of hype. I think there's some hype in the market, but eventually they will come out with something very legitimate.
Interesting. Wow. So you do believe in the underlying technology and its potential to do better to
I guess so, right? I mean, they are very, legit projects. I'm not saying that the whole world
mm,
is gonna be, run by crypto. That's another thing that we miss, or I think overestimate, is that we always think that the world changes from A to B,
mhm,
but most of the time it coexists.
right.
So, for example, AI, it doesn't mean that everything in the world will be done by AI. I don't think so. There are great things that will be done by AI. There are other parts that are not going to be done by AI. Crypto is the same, basically. It doesn't mean that crypto is going to rule the world, I think.
Mm,
But yeah, and a lot of the technologies will coexist, right? A
right.
lot of people thought that PC is going to die when mobile came out.
Mm,
Is it totally dead? No. Actually, we still use our laptops. Some people even use, PCs.
right.
The sales of the PCs actually last year grew a lot.
Mm,
Um, I mean, if VR comes, doesn't mean like everybody's gonna die. No, it's again, it's, I think a lot of technology is being stacked up, right? So we're having a lot of more kind of channels to interact with the world via tech.
mm. I see. I see. I want to talk about, since our conference theme is revolving around resilience in an era of COVID-19. So I wanted to make sure that we get your take on that. So COVID-19 has been transforming and disrupting businesses, economies, and industries worldwide. And a lot of people think that these effects would most likely last into the
Mhm.
post-COVID era. So I was wondering, are there any emerging industry or market trends that you've been eyeing on in particular?
Not necessarily.
Mm,
I'm not a huge fan of predicting, emerging markets or industries. I believe in a gradual, a transition or innovation, because I don't think something happens in a snap, second. It's kind of a hard work by a lot of people, and in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, we see the benefit of that effort.
mm,
If you think about a lot of tech companies, you think that they just came out of nowhere, but a lot of the companies are more than 10 years old. Even like Uber, Airbnb, not only Facebook and Google and Amazon and Netflix and Spotify and all the famous tech companies that we're using a lot, actually they are like 15 years old, 20 years old. And they are gradually coming up with innovations. And the COVID thing, actually, I think we heard about this a lot, but basically, it was a benefit for a lot of tech companies because it forced
mm,
a lot of people who are not really willing to use their services, who are not really willing to download an app and order food delivery, for example, but you don't have any other alternative, so you have to. So that kind of thing accelerated the progression, and the tech companies totally benefited. Doesn't mean that it's gonna disappear after COVID. No. One thing that I just wanted to mention, not only about the COVID, but I think people kind of underestimate the power of the consumer tech companies.
mm,
They think sometimes, there are some people even teaching, some experts are saying that, when it comes to internet or mobile apps, the switching cost is so low, so you can just use another, product. And in reality, I say it's totally wrong.
mm,
The switching cost is pretty high. Ask yourself,
mm,
when was the last time that you downloaded a totally new app? When was the last time that you put an app on your first screen? We don't really download a lot of apps,
right,
right? If you
right.
change a phone, you just, transfer it, or sometimes you just download a new app, but
Mm,
most of the time, those are the apps that you used a lot. So basically, those 20, 25 apps, the top 20, 25 apps, they are super powerful. It's really difficult for a new company to get into those. And again, if you are those tech companies, it's very easy to actually expand your service.
Mm.
If there are some students, who learned the concept, or who took any kind of business courses and learned the concept of cross selling, basically it means that you are selling some more additional products or different products to the same customer, right? And try to compare this. For example, P&G is a perfect company, right? P&G is such a great company, and they have their hair product, they have their skincare product, whatever it is. Imagine you're trying to cross sell something to a customer. Even though P&G is great and they have a bunch of product lines, it's not very easy. Versus, I mean, if you are Facebook, if you are Google, actually you are adding new features and people just use it. And actually, that added feature is completing the product even better. And customers are getting locked into that.
Mm.
So, yeah, this is gonna accelerate more, and the power of the tech companies will increase, not decrease. Yeah, I believe the tech companies are in a great position, even post COVID.
Wow, very interesting. Tech company just riding the wave, and that's something that we should all keep an eye out on. I guess maybe on a related note, you throughout this course of this chat, you brought up some concepts from business management, and so I wanted to ask you about the MBA courses that you teach. So one that caught my attention was managing a high tech company from the CEO perspective. And so I'm curious, as a business professor, how do you structure your curriculum? And if you can, would you recommend any books or business cases for the audience here to check out?
Okay, let me see. So, when I was first asked to teach a course, I really thought about, how I should structure the course, what kind of content I have to teach. And then one thing that was bothering a lot was that I believe that there is a huge misconception of tech companies.
Mm.
For example, a lot of people were saying that, hey, Facebook is just an app, a social media. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's much more than that. And it's super powerful. A lot of people were saying that, hey, Uber is just like an app calling, a cab. And I'm like, not really, do you think that's easy to do? Actually, they created a new market. A lot of people who are using Uber and Lyft are the people who are not regularly taking a taxi. So it's a totally different thing. But because of that, there's like half of my course is discussing, successful tech companies, including, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Uber, Netflix, Spotify, all those, companies, and try to discuss the core of those, and see why they are so powerful in a sense, or vulnerable in some areas. So that's like half of the course. So really understanding the core of tech. And the other half is that um, at, as they will become like the future managers at a lot of companies, I was telling them that making a decision could be quite different from analyzing a problem.
Mm.
So I come up with a bunch of, real life examples and saying that, hey, maybe on paper this looks better, but looking into the restrictions or the circumstances that you're having at your company, maybe your best option might change.
Mm.
And on top of that, another very important thing is that at the end of the day, you are leading people.
Mm.
If you don't understand that you're leading people, let's say that you made a radical decision and nobody follows that, then it's a wrong decision, right? So trying to discuss the real meaning of leadership. I spent also quite a lot of time, discussing that with real life examples that I experienced personally.
Gotcha. Well, for the audience out there, if you just got hooked on by what Professor Rim has said, make sure to enroll in the NYU Stern School of Business. Well, yes, very nice. So at this stage, I think we're going to take some questions from our audience. I have my first question from Jay Kim. It seems like the Korean government has been quite selective about defending existing industries. For example, we've seen this case of Tada or Uber, right, being prevented from running its normal business models. So in this kind of environment, how can entrepreneurs still be innovative when there may be some regulatory or policy obstacles that deter creative destruction?
That's a great question, but actually a very difficult, question to answer. One thing I just want to begin with, there are limitations. You have to admit, if you're running like a company here and there, and if you're like a global company, actually you have to adjust to the local market. For example, I'm not sure if you are, if the person who asked the question is following like the global trends. For example, recently Google and Facebook were facing some backlash from the Australian government, right, regarding how they are providing the news service. For example, the Australian government was demanding them to pay the publishers, and Google and Facebook in the beginning, they were saying that, hey, you know what, we don't run, the business model is not like that, and etc. And they were not trying to follow the government's guidance or direction. But eventually they said yes, right? So, and when it comes to like Uber, I think the United States is one of the very few country that has very limited restrictions. And sometimes you can just say no to the government because you are having so many states and the states' laws are different. In some sense, the states are competing against each other. So it's a little bit more difficult to totally ban a business. But even if you go to Europe, for example, there are many, many cities that are banning Uber. Then there's nothing that you can do, actually. So, I think sometimes you have to admit that it's really difficult to go against the government, because most of the governments, if they really decide to do something, if they really decide to restrict or ban a business, they can do it. So
there's some element of inevitability in that as well.
I guess so.
Well, thank you for that. Our next question is, at which point does a tech company become too big? And is it proper for the industry to have a very limited number of competitors?
I'm not sure if you can come up with like a number saying that, hey, you know what? If the big tech companies are capturing like 30% of the S&P 500, that's too big. Or if you can say that, hey, you know what, maybe if they are capturing 70% of the market share, that's too big. I'm not sure if you can come up with some magic number of that. But the second part actually of the question, I think it's automatically answering the question, meaning that I think if we are not seeing new companies coming out in that area and innovating and coming up with a better way to serve the customers, that is the time that we all have to be worried, because new things, innovation is always more beneficial to the customers. So that's a better way to look at this problem, rather than saying that, hey, Google is too big, Facebook is too big, Amazon is too big, because actually in a sense they are actually competing against each other in almost every single area. Facebook is not a social media company. They are basically a recommendation engine that is, and delivering most of the services that we need in our, our life. Google the same. Amazon is also expanding here and there. So basically it's like they are competing in every market. And I don't know. If if we find some evidence that they are hindering and blocking innovation, those things really definitely have to be regulated. But I'm not sure if it's just a good idea to say that, hey, these are too big based on certain numbers.
I see. That makes sense. Thank you. Let's see. We've got time for a few more questions. Another question concerned global expansion. So under your leadership, Kakao accelerated its global expansion, especially in content industries. So would you have any advice for Korean startups or businesses that are also trying to tap into the US or foreign markets?
I mean, the environment became much better for sure. Like 10 years ago, everybody's going to laugh at you if you said that you're going to do some global business while you are, having your company in South Korea. Now, a lot of people think that, oh, you know what, maybe that's possible, right? So the environment totally changed, not only the perception, but also because of the infrastructure that we're having. And what I mean by infrastructure is, we can have a little bit more decentralized workforce. We have a bunch of social media to reach out. So if you create a really great product, there's a way to actually bring in, customers thanks to a bunch of existing platforms. That made the equation different, that it is possible, but still, I believe that you really have to have an edge and you really have to understand what game you're playing. For example, as you pointed out, at Kakao, we were doubling down our efforts on content because we believed that, Korea's content really had its competitive advantage compared to a bunch of, other countries' content. We saw that the demand was rising, and thanks to the social media, I mean, we were pretty sure that, this will just grow. So we were sure that we're not Facebook, so we should invest on the content and, enjoy that demand, right? So that was one thing. But actually, on the other hand, I closed or reduced the business of Kakao Talks Global Business. There was like plenty of people working on Kakao Talks Global Business, but I became the CEO in 2015. And even at that time already, most of the countries had their own number one messenger. For example, in China, of course, it's WeChat. Japan, it's Line. Southeast Asia, it was like either, WeChat, or some countries had, WhatsApp. The US and Europe, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. So, to expand Kakao Talk as a messenger in other countries, you could become like number 4 messenger, number 5, number 3 messenger, having still like 1 million users. It sounds good, but in reality, it's really difficult to build, a business based on being a number 4 messenger at a certain country. So I was like, hey, let's admit, everybody wants to become like a global business, but I don't think that Kakao Talk could be our solution to that. We should rather reduce the efforts putting on there, and we should actually increase our investment on content, because this is something that, is unique in Korea, and we can really, benefit from this global appetite and social media and everything. So those are some examples that apply to us. But a lot of startups really, I think, should look into the situation in their market and see, hey, what's the real strength that we have, and should we double down on that? And there are many examples that actually a lot of Korean companies were pretty good here and there. And global doesn't necessarily mean the United States. There are lots of other countries that you can become pretty successful. So that's another way to look at it.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. It also seems like aligning the priorities was an important task for you. And so we have another question asking you about your next steps. So what's next for you? You've had such a illustrious career with turns and twists. I mean, obviously you're a full-time professor at NYU Stern right now, but do you foresee yourself doing something different in the future, or?
I mean, I'm not sure. Very honestly speaking, I'm not sure because even, let's go back to 2018 when I quit Kakao, I didn't know that I'm gonna become like a professor, right? When I founded my VC firm, I thought that I'm gonna run that fund for 20 years, but all of a sudden I became the CEO of Kakao. I never thought that I'm gonna quit the Boston Consulting Group in a year, right? So I enjoy that lifestyle. Again, I'm saying this, right? To certain people, this might not be the best way to live your life. A lot of people might like some more predictable lifestyle. In my case, again, I enjoy being at a new area and pushing myself to the edge because that forces me to do something. That forces me to learn something very quickly, and I really like that moment that I am learning. I can feel that I'm really being pushed. Sometimes I'm a little bit stressed, but still I enjoy that moment that I am learning something very quickly, and yeah. So I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do, but yeah, there's a chance that I'll do something new.
And we're excited for your next steps as well. So
Mhm.
I think this is going to be our final question of the day. And
Mhm.
the last question for you is for really all the college students out there who might be feeling somewhat, clueless about what they want to do in the future. So you kind of hit on these points, but we just wanted to ask, do you have anything to say to those of us who are still struggling to find the ideal career
Mhm.
path?
I want to begin with this. Actually, struggling and not knowing what you're passionate about is normal. Actually, I think because of the media, we are too much pressed,
Mm,
and we are kind of, forced to think that we should be passionate about something that we are doing. But actually, we just, you just began your college life. You just spent like 3 4 years at your college. You're still so young. I mean, there are some people who kind of right away realize what they want to do. Okay, you know what? I want to become a doctor. I want to become like an investment banker. I want to become like a consulting partner. Good for them. I mean, they found their passion very early. That's good for them. But there's still a lot of people, who don't know what to do. And I think it's totally okay.
mm,
Again, in my case, I didn't know what I do. I was an engineer. I wasn't really great at KAIST. So I was like, what should I do? And that was the reason, I just thought, hey, you know what? Even though I graduated from an engineering school, maybe I should just try out, the consulting firms. And then I moved around again and again and again, right? So for sure, I think you should try out everything that you can, because if you just listen to famous people saying that something is good or not, you don't really understand what that work is, and unless you do it, you don't really understand if you like it or not.
mm,
Basically, you have to find something that is going to be a combination of what you are good at and what you like it, right? Hopefully, but the only way to figure that out is by doing it. And there's another thing, I think that could be even more important, is that a lot of us hesitate when we're trying to do something new, right? Right? What should I do? And even after graduation, if you're doing some kind of career switch,
mm.
but I switched my career a lot, and throughout the whole process, I always ask this question, which is, what's the real risk of me, moving to another place and assume I failed at it?
Mm,
What's the real risk? And I kind of realized that, the risk might not be as big as I thought about it. For example, let's say I was, at consulting and I moved to venture capital and I wasn't really good at, venture capital. Let's assume it was like that.
mhm.
Maybe I wasted a year or two, but not really wasted. I learned a lot. Eventually, I could just go back to consulting. Is that a real failure in your life when you're going to live like 100 years? I don't think so. So a lot of the decisions that you're making actually are reversible, right? A lot of the decisions that you're making are reversible. So the real risk might not be as big as you think about it. So that's the reason throughout this, talk, I love this word. So, I think I already used it several times, is that why not try? Why not try? What do you really lose? I don't think that there's going to be a huge loss, even though you fail it. So why not try, right? So that's going to be my last kind of advice, I guess.
Why not try? Love it.
Right.
My sincerest thanks, Professor Rim, for taking your time out of your busy schedule to speak to us today.